Like you said earlier, we tend to overcorrect. And I think, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of nonsense before we, again, overcorrect. And the people that are going to probably suffer those consequences are the people that we're allegedly, supposedly trying to protect, right? It's just
Yes,
it's the nature of the beast.
I do think this is an overcorrection, but I've also made the point that, do you know what one group never gets an overcorrection on? Women.
Hello, everybody. You're listening to Chatting with Candace. I'm your host, Candace Horback. Before we get started on this week's episode, if you want to support the podcast, you can go to chattingwithcandace.com. From there, you can sign up for our Patreon account where you get early access to episodes, or you can click that little link that says Buy Me Coffee. Both things help me out a ton as I'm just getting started. And then another way that you can support the podcast is simply by leaving a review and clicking that 5-star button. And if you're listening on YouTube, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. So one of our last pieces of housekeeping, if you are a CBD fan, it's all the rage. I've been using Omura. It's Omura. And it's really cool. They have this awesome technology that doesn't heat the flower. It just kind of warms it, so it keeps it super pure and the integrity stays intact. It's a lot more gentle on your lungs. If you want to try it out, it's 15% off with code Candace. Again, that's Omura. It's Omura, code Candace for 15% off. It is not number one in Europe for no reason. They're starting to make a splash in the States, so definitely go check them out. If you are in a state or country where weed is legal, they also have a THC brand or line that's really great. But I'm in North Carolina, so CBD for me. And just a couple more things before we head into the episode. So Thursday nights, I'm going to be live on Twitch, and you can follow me on social to see what time I will be broadcasting. Twitter is probably the best, and it's at Candace Horback or on Instagram. And then Friday nights, we're going to have a new series called Deeper, where I invite the guest to rejoin the conversation. We'll be chatting live and taking guests onto the stage for a live Q&A. So if we touched on topics but we didn't get deep enough, then this is a great opportunity for you to ask our guest and participate in the podcast, which is pretty cool. So again, they will all be posted on my social accounts. Times are obviously going to vary to accommodate the guest schedule, so just make sure that you follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Candace Horback, and I will keep you updated with my schedule. I'm really excited for this. Clubhouse is a really cool platform, so I hope to see you there. And now a quick word from one of our sponsors. So if you're a fan of CBD, as most people are these days, I started using whole flower CBD from Omura. It's Omura. So it's really unique in the sense that you can shop the different flowers. They kind of give you a tasting menu similar to a wine experience, which I just absolutely love. I think it's such a fun little add-on. They actually don't burn the flower, so it's a gentle heat, which makes it a lot more enjoyable. It keeps the integrity of the flower. It's a lot more gentle on your lungs and just a better experience overall. I like that the dosing is already measured out for you, so there's no mess. It's like this little cartridge that you kind of just pop in. And if you want to check it out, you get 15% if you use the code Candace. So head on over to omuracbd.com. It's omuracbd.com and use code Candace for 15% off. And with all of that said, I hope you enjoy this week's episode. We have CEO of Giggle, Sall Grover.
I'll be like totally fine by just 3 hours ago, I'll be fine by 4, and my alarm went off and I was like, what can I quit?
Oh my gosh, you're very brave for scheduling something at that hour. I try to wake up at 6 if I really have stuff to get done and I just can't do it. I'm not a morning person if my life depended on it.
I can't do work in the morning, and I don't, so I'll have a nap after this for a few hours.
Yeah, you'll have to.
Yeah, but then I don't do much work kind of almost before midday. I'm I'm a bit useless. I can answer a few questions, but I'm a bit just leave me alone. And then I'll hit my stride and I'll work until I could work until 4 o'clock in the morning, no problem.
Yeah, late hours aren't an issue for me, but we have a 1-year-old, so my schedule's been all over the place. It takes a lot of energy.
I was like, I actually, in my building, there's a woman who she has, like, her little girl is just turned 1 last week. And I was so exhausted yesterday, and I was saying to her, I was like, how do you do it? How do moms do it? I'm like, I just have a startup.
Well, that's really difficult too. My husband, he did the whole like build an app and bootstrap it bit, and you are very brave souls for doing that. It is the most trying thing that we've gone through as a couple.
It is, like, because my mom and I own Giggle, and I'll never forget, like, the conversation when we're sitting there, like, many glasses of wine to the wind, and we're like, yeah, we're going to create an app for women to connect. If we knew then what we knew now, I'd still do it. Gosh, it would have been nice to know.
Oh my gosh. So what was that process like for you? Did you bootstrap it, like pay for everything yourself? Did you get funding?
We got investors.
Yeah.
So we did a family and friends investment round, and that's how we were able basically to get to where we are now. We wanted to do things. One, like, obviously, I like own it. I want to own the company. I don't want someone else to give it. And especially in the startup world, the majority of VCs and angel investors are men. And so, I mean, you walk into any room going, oh, so it's an app for women. Like, there's a few I've talked to, and they're like, do women need something to connect? Would women talk to each other? I'm like, what planet are you? What? I'm like, or like, there's been situations where I've said, I don't want to have to sort of explain or quantify misogyny or abuse that women receive online to anybody. I'm not interested in doing that. So we wanted to basically bring people that we know in along the journey, like lots of women that we know, in fact. And then, I do everything. Like, you know, when you're at the beginning stages of a startup, you do everything that needs to be done that I can physically do. Like, the only thing I don't do is I don't code, for example.
Which is like the most expensive part, though, right? Whew. You can rack up some bills.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's why, like, sometimes when some people will go after me on Twitter or things, and I'm like, do you think this is a hobby? No. Like, this is a proper company with serious investment, and I have people to answer to. And to sometimes random Twitter person, I'm not going to be answering your questions. But I just sort of promoted.
When you reached out, I was actually kind of surprised that, like, you're getting like some shit for this, because I was like, that just seems like a very needed space, right? Like, men have their space, women have their space, and now you're kind of like digitizing that by putting it into an app. I feel like that's normal. And then I was like going through your Twitter, and I was like, oh dang, like, she's really getting it. And I saw you reposting like death threats, and it was really blowing my mind. So when you were first starting this and you were approaching like VCs or angel investors, did anyone like see this coming? Like, did anyone like kind of warn you, where you were a little ignorant to the wave of criticism you were going to get?
No, I always knew that there was going to be criticism and the huge negative response to it. I didn't anticipate where the negative response was going to come from. I got that wrong. Yeah. It's been quite amazing, actually. So I thought that it would be people, I thought it would be mainly just men, and they would be conservative. No, liberal men. Liberal men are the ones who have a problem with it.
So why did you assume that it was going to be conservative men?
I assumed it, I suppose, because I was thinking in that sort of Fox News, Tucker Carlson, tinfoil hat wearing world, where it would be like, oh, this is sort of a privilege that women have, or this is ridiculous. Why do women need this? No, sort of the more I like say center conservative leaning people. I'm sure there's been some white supremacists that have come after me, but I don't engage with them in the market. But the more conservative and lots of dads are very, very supportive of it. Lots of dads and husbands. But say men on the left who I've followed on Twitter, like especially like journalists, comedians, who I'd followed for years. And before last year, I'd never tweeted before. I always stayed away from it. I was too scared because it was just such a cesspool. I only started tweeting because I had to respond to just crazy lies that were being said about Giggle. And then I got now I'm in this world of having to respond to them all the time. But yeah, there were these guys that have come after me calling me a TERF, a transphobe. And I'm like, I really respected you. And it makes you change or question everything that they've said. You're now looking at through this prism of, okay, I think that you have a misogyny issue. Because I do think that there are a lot, I know there are a lot of guys out there who are, they themselves would call themselves woke and progressive. A lot of them have Black Lives Matter in their bios, but they would have no problem telling a woman and a Black woman that she is a transphobe or a TERF because she understands biological reality or advocates for women's rights, and will just say really the worst kinds of things. So that's been an interesting journey because I am very much like a left-leaning liberal myself, and I I've watched everything sort of through that's happened over the last few years, sort of through that position, and then experiencing what I think is a way to be a misogynist, but called a hero. That's been my experience with it. That if you you can say anything you want to a woman right now, so long as you use the word TERF.
Right, and a lot of people don't know what that even means, right? So I didn't either. I had Buck Angel on the podcast a few months ago.
Yes.
Yeah, he's wonderful.
Amazing. I love him.
I do too.
He's got like a laugh that every time I watch things or listen to him and things, when he laughs, I'm like, I smile. Like he just like lights up a room. I love him.
I know. I'm like, how can anyone hate that person? I forgot what I was just going to say. Oh, yeah. He was explaining to me what that meant. And I was like, I don't like that we come up with like these weird arbitrary names for each other, because that, like, why is it okay if you do it to someone who I guess we're not considered like marginalized enough anymore, right? If you're like a straight white woman. Yeah. So that's okay. But if you come up with a name for any other group that is considered marginalized, and now that's like hate speech. So why is it not hate speech if if like the intent is that?
Oh, yeah. Completely. No. TERF is 100% a misogynistic slur, and it's basically the only one that's sort of allowed to be used in, I mean, like just mainstream media will do headlines with the word TERF in there. And you're like, what are you, I mean, this is a word that is most of the time accompanied with a threat to shut up or a death threat or a rape threat. The evidence is there. It's like, I shouldn't have to explain this to anybody. You can search it. You could find it, you could confirm this in about 5 seconds. And
so, sorry. For anyone that's listening, TERF it's trans can you, I gave up caffeine 2 days ago. My brain's not working. It's rough. I'll let you go.
Trans exclusionary radical feminist.
There you go. And I don't think I've been called that yet, but I guess like, can we get into like, what is a radical feminist? Okay.
So radical feminist. Okay. First I'll preface it by saying I'm actually not even a radical feminist. I didn't know really about that either. Radical feminist is essentially just it's root feminism. So that's what the word radical is, sort of the Latin root. So it's sort of original feminism, you would say, sort of pre-wave. Just very focused on female rights. So it's very much, understanding biological sex, feminism only centers females. And, it is against sex work, which I think is pretty fair. Not shaming sex workers as such, it's more shaming men who treat sex workers horribly, which I think is a pretty fair position to have. So I would say that, of all of the things I've read, I agree with a lot of the texts of radical feminism. I'm very much at a point where I don't want any more labels. I don't think labels are helping us. Like, I see sometimes there's these fightings, there's the liberal feminists, radical feminists, gender
equality feminists. There's so many.
And I'm like, I don't think that ultimately is doing any good. Just in terms of, like, obviously, you have your opinions and things and beliefs of whatever you want, that's fine. But I think if we just sort of put these labels constantly on everything, I think that's part of the problem at the moment.
I completely agree.
I did have someone recently on Twitter say to me, you say you're against identity politics, but you do something just for women. I'm like, yes, but a woman isn't an identity. It's not. This is where we just are. Like, the most basic thing you can separate people by is sex. It's male or female. And it's not who we are, it's what we are. And it doesn't dictate really much more than that. I mean, you can be a really masculine woman, you can be a really feminine man, you can develop any kind of personality and character that you want. It's just that in terms of lots of medical things and social things, whether you're male or female does make a difference. Like, there's a lot of people that are saying at the moment, you can't tell whether someone's male or female by looking at them.
Yeah, I keep saying that too. And I'm like, for the most 99% of the time, you absolutely can.
100%. When you're walking down the street, you know who's walking towards you. Your brain is processing that, whether you're acknowledging it on a conscious level, you know. You can't trick your brain. No one's walking down the street going, everyone's non-binary until they tell me otherwise. It just doesn't, your brain doesn't work like that. We have survival instincts. We have inbuilt prejudice.
So what do you think the point is of that, to eliminate gender, essentially? Because that's what I see with the activists. It's mostly like abolishing the idea of feminine, masculine, like everyone, like you said, is kind of to be assumed genderless until they tell you their pronoun.
Well, I would say that it would actually be, if you were going for the proper actual destruction of gender in a positive way, it's feminists who are doing that and always have been. That's essentially what feminism has always been, that, just because you're a woman doesn't mean you have to be in a kitchen cooking or raising children, staying at home. You don't have to wear dresses. I mean, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, only men were allowed to ride bicycles. It was women who had to fight for the right to be able to ride a bicycle. It was considered a masculine thing. So that's essentially always been feminism's job, and done it slowly but surely, and I think in a really positive way. The activists, what they're doing at the moment, they're not saying that, they're not sort of trying to abolish gender so much. They're actually trying to abolish biological sex. Oh gosh, okay, well, first, that's not a completely true statement, because there's no consensus of what they're trying to do. Every single activist you speak to will say something completely different. So you have some that are trying to abolish biological sex. You have some that say that there's no such thing as biological sex. You have others who say that human beings can change biological sex. None of which is true. Just really, really simple. If you're born female or you're born male, you will die female or you die male. That's just a fact. But how you live your life in between then is, I think, up to you. I've always been quite libertarian and stuff like this, that as long as it's not harming anybody else, do what you want. Like, if you're a man and you want to wear a dress and makeup, all power to you. I think that's fantastic. That doesn't make you a woman.
Right.
And so that's where the conflict is between feminists and trans rights activists at the moment. And then the major issue with it is that the people making policy are adhering to this ideology of saying that human beings can change biological sex, that if a man wears a dress, he is a woman. And that's just, it's it's not true. And it's very dangerous for so many reasons. One of them is obviously single-sex spaces, something that women earn a right to have out of necessity. It's not segregation. If I hear one more person liken single-sex spaces to apartheid, I will scream.
Oh, I haven't heard that it's segregation yet. At least that hasn't come across my feed.
They do it all the time. They'll be like, oh, so do you want people drinking out of different water fountains? No.
That's not even close to a fair comparison. So what would you say are like the main reasons why you think like a digital space for women is important?
Well, I think that in terms of having single-sex spaces have always been important. I think they're important for men as well. Mm-hmm. They're just important for different reasons. For women, a big part of it is safety, and a bit of freedom of expression as well. So we've had, spaces where sometimes always for really negative reasons, like it'll be single sex spaces for domestic violence or, for refuge or a rape crisis center. Mm-hmm. But then occasionally, we do have these really great positive ones that have popped up. Natural evolution for anything at the moment is it's going to go online. And for us, when we were talking about Giggle, we wanted to create something that no matter where you were in the world, you would just have a strong female support network in the palm of your hand that was accessible at all times. Mm-hmm. Just knowing that. Like when I was recovering from being in Hollywood and I'd had so much sexual harassment, sexual assault, and I was a shell of a person. And my therapist would tell me, you have to learn how to connect with people again, especially women. It's so important to have a strong female support network because, say, in like Hollywood, it was isolating, a very isolating place. And the industry is isolating by design. But there's lots of places like that. Like cities can be very isolating. You can be around lots of people, but you're not connecting with anybody. Mm-hmm. And while there's no substitute for the human-to-human contact, which we're all discovering in a pandemic, that how important human contact is, the next best thing is being able to connect verbally. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, I do too. And I thought it was interesting that you said a lot of dads are very supportive of the platform, which I didn't even think of. And of course, if I had a daughter and she was of age to be on like a social platform, I would be a lot more comfortable with her being in a female space only versus like on Twitter or Instagram right now, because if you open up your messages, if you're a woman, if you open up your direct messages, there are going to be a lot of pictures and videos that you don't want to see. And let alone if maybe that's like a traumatic experience for you, or if you're underage, there's a whole host of reasons why someone shouldn't get those kinds of messages. So to go on a platform where you can open those without being assaulted by some photo, some unsolicited dick pics. That's nice.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Right. I don't just snap and like randomly send my bits to people. I don't know why.
But that's the difference between men and women, isn't it? But it would never ever occur to us to do that.
No.
No, I actually have a really funny dick pic story. This will just be a little funny anecdote. So I've received so many unsolicited dick pics in my life, and I have saved them all and on my phone because I'm like, because I'm just like, if they're unsolicited and they've said something else, like they're in that file of I still have that buddy. Yes, if you're mean to me, I will show you your mother. And when I moved home from the States, my dad, I was at my parents' house, and my dad was so excited that I was back. I hadn't been back in 2 years. I hadn't seen them. And he wanted to set up my phone with an Australian SIM card and everything. And I was like, no, it's fine. I'll do it later. He's like, no. And I didn't even realize that he'd taken my phone. And then my mom, dad, and I were standing there, and the computer's in the background. And I didn't realize my dad had plugged it in. And suddenly all my photos are updating. I'm just, dick. I'm like, oh.
It's like, what have you been up to in the States?
No, it was like one of those moments where I was like, just don't turn around. Just don't turn around.
Oh my gosh. Mortified.
It's Absolutely. So, yeah, it was horrible, horrible. We have one of our like little like memes for Giggle is like, yeah, it's a social network where, you know, the eggplant emoji, just an eggplant emoji.
That's so good. One of my girlfriends was saying she was going to do like, because she was doing the same thing where she was keeping a log of all of the unsolicited dick pics she was getting. And she's like, I'm going to turn it into a coffee table book and then sell it. And then all these men are like, I wonder if that's mine.
Yeah. No, completely. I have like thought of there should be something similar. There should be a coffee table book of like, yeah, like dick pics and just like the messages of even just like abuse or harassment that they will just send you, because some of it's hilarious that you get where they'll just send you, you know, a message just telling you how much they hate you. And you're like, you feel better? Like, okay.
Yeah. Fine. Yeah. So, I mean, that's like one very simple way to explain why your app is needed. And then I think it was on your Twitter that you were also saying like a woman that maybe undergoes like some kind of like sexual violence, right? Like she doesn't have to explain why she's uncomfortable in like a male's presence, right? So that's like another.
Because for me, when I returned to Australia, like I was a screenwriter in Hollywood for almost 10 years. And when I came back here, I like, even if my dad like gave me a hug, I couldn't, I'd stiffen up. I was just terrified of men's presence in general. And there was no reason for me to be scared of my dad. It was just the maleness of it. And so, yeah, it is the thing that says there are some people out there that may never understand it, but I don't think that women have to justify it. It's also one of my things about female spaces is that we don't have to sit here and relive our trauma and talk about it all the time to justify wanting one. We're also just fun. Really, really fun. It's like you talk about something, like how you talk is slightly different. How you talk about yourself is slightly different. It's a special place where you can let down your guard a bit. In a different way. I mean, we all have like our little boundaries that we have in society and what we're going to share with ourselves. But it's a different kind of trust. And it's just on Giggle, last week we launched Giggle Talk, which is our female-only social media feed. And it's sort of the hybrid of Twitter and Reddit is the user experience, how I would sum it up. And it's really cool. And it's great. Like all of the women who are the first ones on there, they're fantastic. And getting sort of this exhale of like, okay, let's get used to this. How often are we in situations, especially online, where we know that there's no men?
Never.
Yeah.
Yeah, never. So did you start out like women only, like, or did you kind of start to like sift through that as you like developed?
So when we were developing Giggle, I mean, it was always going to be just an app for women, always. And I was the one who was fighting to have trans women welcome. Everyone else at Giggle HQ actually didn't agree with me.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but I was saying, no, like at the time I was like, it's 2019. We're going to be inclusive. This is how it is. And so in February of last year, we had been on the App Store and Google Play for only a few weeks, and only a handful of select women knew about Giggle because we were still testing and ironing out bugs and everything. And we woke up one morning to thousands of downloads because the trans rights activists communities of Twitter and Reddit had discovered Giggle. We have to this day no idea how they did. And the ones that got on just created kill turf profiles. That was my first introduction to the word. Oh, wow. I didn't know. Because when we were developing Giggle and this was the inspiration for it and the lead up to it, I was very much in this sort of Me Too world. So I just wasn't focusing on this other side that was happening. It hadn't entered Australia at all at that point. It's really only just starting now. There are some Australians who think I'm absolutely insane telling people that women are being called vagina owners. I sound ridiculous, but I'm like, this is happening.
Oh, I see that all the time. It pisses me off so much.
It's just so disgusting. Yeah, and so I just really, and it's my fault. I just didn't know it because in my wildest nightmares, it didn't occur to me that there would be anyone out there actually saying that the concept of woman doesn't exist. It didn't occur to me to look if that was a thing. And so when the first attack happened, and I went online to sort of see where it was all coming from, and I stumbled across a subreddit of radical feminism, and I went in and asked them some things, and I was still at that point very much, I didn't want to offend anybody, and I mean these women, I mean they were very lovely with me and patient as one can be when you are sort of exhausted by talking about this stuff. But they told me, and the trans rights activists were telling me, they were all saying, just educate yourself. And I was like, no, that's fair enough. So I went and started educating myself on what was happening, especially in the UK and in Canada and in the US. But the US is slightly different, just how it's almost the originator of it, but it's just slightly different how it is existing in society, I think. It didn't take long to realize what was happening, that the feminists were telling the truth. Because the first thing that I saw that I was just absolutely shocked by is that lesbians were being called transphobes, TERFs, and bigots because they won't date or sleep with self-identifying women who are just men in dresses for the most part. And I just couldn't unsee this attack on women's boundaries that we just spent a millennia being able to have consent. And these lesbians, and incidentally, it was lesbians who were the first to ever raise alarms about all of this stuff.
Oh, really? I feel like someone else might have said that. Well, that's really surprising.
Yeah, I think Buck's pretty switched on with it all. But yeah, I mean, and no one's listened to them because, of course, no one listens to a lesbian woman screaming fire in a theater that is on fire.
Well, it sounds kind of crazy, though, right? Like I never would have thought we would have gotten here to where like the word woman was like a bad word. Like you're not allowed to say woman. Especially because like if you take any of the, no, you wouldn't. Like all those gender classes, like most people that sign up for those are women, right? So a lot of the movements, like the movement for rights for the trans community was brought on by biological women, right? Like they were.
Well, you have sort of like Judith Butler, who is when I say a feminist writer, I'm using the words feminist and writer in the loosest sense both could be used. She's not very good at either thing. Yes, but she is very much, I think she lives in an absolute fantasy land that has absolutely no basis in reality. It's some sort of utopia that she's created in her mind, but she's very much sort of you'd almost say like a godmother of this sort of gender studies sort of stuff and postmodernism where, that you're a woman if you say you are. And it's like, it's just that sounds great in theory to some, I suppose, but it does not work in reality. It does not work in the world that we live in. And so basically the feminists the lesbians were bringing all this up. And when this is all over and we all collectively owe the lesbians a big, like nice drink because they have been doing the work to preserve women's rights, under so much scrutiny and attack. The other thing I saw was African women who use Twitter or other platforms to raise awareness and to stop female genital mutilation being called transphobes and TERFs because they use the word female, because they say that, that it's bigoted. This is not something, the vagina isn't necessarily female. So, and it was just nonsense. And to be attacking, it actually just happened the other day. An amazing, just the most gorgeous inside and out woman in the UK, Hibo. I think she's originally from Somalia, but I could be wrong about that. She has a huge platform on Twitter and she just works online and in real life, she goes around to schools in the UK talking about female genital mutilation, bringing awareness to it. These are the ways that we can stop it. This is how to help. What she does, she is a survivor of it herself. So she knows what she's talking about, and she knows, the depths of what can happen to being when you're just born a woman. To see them attacked by these activists and utter nonsense. The other day she was saying, I love everyone. You be who you are. You're totally fine. I'm a woman. I'm talking about women and girls. Do not bring this over here. These are two very different things. And she's right. Mm-hmm. And this stuff is being completely ignored by, say, the people in power. Like, I don't, for the most part, really care about random trolls on Twitter or young people. There's a lot of young people who have bought into this that I feel really sorry for them. They've been really misled by adults, whether it's writers or university professors or lecturers. They've been lied to. But so I have a problem with those people, the ones that are doing the lying to begin with and telling people this is true. I mean, there's also detransitioning women. So they got caught up as teenagers in this thinking, and not all, but a lot of them are lesbian women who they were told because, they were more masculine, sort of what we would know as like a tomboy or a butch lesbian, that they were actually men. So they started taking testosterone. They've had mastectomies. Some of them have had hysterectomies, and now they're in their early 20s and they're detransitioning because, no, they're not transgender. They're just gender nonconforming lesbians. And they get attacked by trans activists. Actual transsexual people, most of whom prefer to be called transsexual people, if they are on the side of women and biological reality, they are under attack. So this is just not a movement about equality. It's about adherence to ideology, and that right now, it's women mainly that are in terms of men or women, it's women who are under attack in the sense that if a woman stands up and says biological sex is real, you're only a woman if you're born a woman. I mean, she faces the potential of losing her job. The attacks you're going to get. Whereas men don't get as many attacks. I did a thing on Twitter not long ago. I said, have any men been sent death threats over this? There was one.
So why do you think so many people are falling into this? Like, why? Because I see a lot of women, like I know you've mentioned a lot of men are getting involved with it, but I think more women tend to get very defensive and like attacky about anyone that doesn't drink the Kool-Aid, right? Like if you acknowledge that biological sex is real, then you must be like some kind of ist or agate or whatever, right? Like they give you a name. But it's almost like denouncing all of the strides that women have made, right? Like you said, we couldn't ride bicycles, we couldn't vote, we couldn't have credit cards, all of these things that we take for granted.
I was researching this, and in Australia, my mum could not get a passport on her own until 1983.
Oh my gosh.
She had to have either her father or her husband sign the form.
Oh my gosh.
I was born in 84.
Wow.
That's just mind-blowing to me.
How recent it was.
Well, we say, I mean, that's mind-blowing how recent it is. I mean, good luck for a Saudi Arabian woman trying to get a passport. It's impossible. I mean, this is happening right now. We live, I did have one person tell me one time over Twitter that they were like, trans women don't even have rights in Saudi Arabia. And I was like, honey, women don't have rights in Saudi Arabia. No one has rights in Saudi Arabia. This is not a trans issue in any way, shape, or form. So why women? Okay, I have a few theories of this. There is, in a way, because the gender issue and the trans issue, let's say the T issue, is attached to the LGB community. So there's the next thing onto that, even though it's actually quite in opposition. And there's now the different LGB organizations that are popping up now that have separated from it, because homosexuality is defined, and heterosexuality, defined in reality where biological sex is real. It's why lesbians aren't attracted to men in dresses. They're attracted to the biology of a woman. So there's a bit of an overcorrection because, as society, how horrible society has been to homosexual people forever. You don't want to make the same mistakes. So something comes along and it seems similar, you sort of overcorrection, you overly good, like, let's not, persecute these people for who they are, like gay people were. That's one thing. So really good intentions behind it. And of course you don't want to persecute somebody for being trans in any way, shape or form. These people, they're human beings. Then, okay, the two sort of maybe a bit more controversial, my own sort of theories. One is I can picture a person who's like, okay, I'm going to basically start what is a very, very misogynistic movement. I think it's a little bit of punishment for Me Too because we were so organized and really made moves with that. And there's a lot of men who didn't like that. And so I think that a lot of the really powerful men who are involved in this current gender ideology movement, I don't think they care at all about trans people. But I think they love the fact that they can be a misogynist and called a hero for it. So if I was a man involved in that movement and had power in it, the first thing I would do is get some women on side. Then it's not, they have an argument back for when you say it's a misogynistic movement. And not to take any agency or away from women or the fact that we can think for ourselves or anything. I completely obviously we can. I understand that. However, I do think that there are some women involved in this who are in a bit of an abusive relationship with it. I look at it differently to how I look at men who peddle this stuff. The men, because in this gender ideology stuff, men's rights don't change at all. Men are not under threat by this. Their words are not under threat. We're not walking around calling them penis owners or ejaculators or sperm havers. They're just men. Their sports are completely fine because no trans man is going to win. No one is worried about that. And a lot of the times they can't compete because of the testosterone levels are considered doping. And no one is even thinking about trans men's rights here. So that's part of the sexism in the whole thing. So nothing changes for men in this whole situation, but it does for women. Our sport, which biological males will beat women most of the time. Like I'm talking 98% of the time. The statistics are very, very high, worryingly high. And then our spaces, and then our words. The attack on the language to describe females, women, like the fact that I even have to say females so often.
I say women still. I'm not changing that.
Like same, but sometimes I say females because I just don't want the confusion because it's so frustrating. But yes, then I'm like I'm playing into it, aren't I? But so I think that there are some women who, that think that they're doing a really good thing and have been sold this idea, and I think manipulated in this idea that there's these like nasty TERFs who are so hateful and horrible, and you should hate them, and they're part of the patriarchy and they want to oppress people. And say absolutely no way.
Yeah, they call you like the pick me girls is what they say now. So like I took a gender studies class back in college and I got so swept up in all of it. And I was like, this is horrible. These people are under attack. They need our help. And I was, like very much like trans rights, blah, blah, blah. And I mean, I've never lived anywhere, thankfully, that's like very, backwards or dated. Like everywhere I've ever lived is like very accepting. I've trans friends, I've gay friends, all over, right? And everyone's treated just fine where I live. I know that's not the case for everybody. But then you start to see what the activists are pushing, and that's like a very different narrative, right? It's not for equal rights. It's for like special treatment, and it's
100%.
it's at the cost of women. So if you say that, they call you a pick-me girl, which means that you're just trying to gain acceptance and approval from men by siding with them instead of with women, and it's just nonsense.
See, this is the thing, and I say this all the time to women, because I'm not angry or hateful or frustrated by the women who support this gender ideology. First of all, every woman can support whatever she wants. She doesn't have to agree with me, so that's fine. I do think that there'll be a tipping point when they will realize that what they are supporting is against their own rights. Because one of the things with this whole concept of like TERFs are evil, like, do people really think that that women and lesbian women and Black women all woke up one morning and went, yeah, I'm going to be a bigot towards this one group of people? No, like, of course not. Like, what, you think lesbians who know a thing or two about being trying to get accepted by society went, not for you, buddy? No, it's coming from a fact-based, real place. And that's why one of the things that's easy, in a sense, to fight all of this stuff is it's easy when you have facts on your side. Sometimes it's very boring fighting it because it just doesn't change. It just, men and women exist. There's only two sexes. That's all there is.
Well, the science on it's being quieted, right? And then those people that speak out are kind of being deplatformed. So even though like the science does like prove as it stands that there are two sexes, right? And like they are not fluid, you can still lose everything you have over it.
We all know how babies are made. That's just end of story.
Well, I've seen some articles that are trying. They say that the science is close to be able to, or not close. They're trying to get it close for a biological man to carry a baby. And for me, first of all, I don't probably think in our lifetime. Also, as a mother, I find that to be wildly selfish because your instincts are to do any means possible to keep that child safe. Whatever is best for that child is what you do, not what's best for me, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So just because I want to carry a baby, if I'm not supposed to carry a baby and that's going to increase harm or development for them, I'm not going to do it, right? So, I mean, I breastfed for over a year. That sucked. It wasn't great. It wasn't the best for me or my schedule, but it was best for the baby. So you make all these sacrifices on yourself for your child. So when I see stuff like, I think Buck posted on his Twitter, they came up with like some way that
I saw that.
Biological men are secreting, it's not milk, but it's something to feed the baby. And I was like, that's so selfish. Like the reason I could have, popped a bottle in the microwave, called it a day, saved myself so much pain and time. But that's not what's best for the baby. So this brand new substance that's coming out of you that's bioengineered, do you want to do that? Is that a good idea?
I don't want to be the test case of it, that's for sure.
No, and you shouldn't want your baby to be.
I see these articles about like that males will be able to have children. Where are the wombs coming from?
I guess they're synthetic, unless they're not.
That would be best case scenario, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Because the only other place that they could come from is real life women. No, I don't want babies born in synthetic wombs to males. I think that's incredibly selfish. There's
just something really magical that happens like throughout the gestational period. Like I know like people that haven't experienced it, they're going to think bullshit. But the moment I realized I was pregnant, like I knew I was having a boy. There was this connection. Like I knew him before he came out, and he is exactly who I pictured while he was in my belly. Like the same like personality.
Don't worry about my dog. Dog mom. I have no concept of what it must be like to have a baby.
I always used to compare my dog. And I was like, it's got to be like kind of similar because I really love my dog. But it's like, it's this whole other thing. And when you like talk to the baby in the belly and you like are rubbing your belly and you have these like moments that you're just like, you're one consciousness almost. Right. Like, sure, you might be able to create someone in a lab in a synthetic uterus, but like, again, what's best for that? What's best for that spirit?
What's best for that, like, growing human being who's got its own life to lead? Because it's not, when you're having a baby, you're very much aware that you're creating a human being that's going to have its own life beyond you. So if you're doing this because of your own sort of, this
something you're trying to fill, a void of some sort,
void of validation or something. I think it's incredibly odd. And then I also think of, there are a lot of women who are infertile, and it's heartbreaking for them. I pretty much am. I have endometriosis. We have endometriosis and polycystic ovaries in our family.
Same.
Oh no way! Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm in pain most of the time. And so the chances of me ever having a baby is slim to none. Unfortunately, I don't want one. My instinct is to adopt eventually.
Which is so beautiful.
I would love to have children, but I've just never had the biological urge. Even when I was a teenager, I used to say it, and everyone would say, when you get to your late 20s, early 30s, it'll kick in. And I'm like, I'm 36 now, and I am just waiting for the biological clock to just click on over to 5 past midnight. When I think of the women who just try so hard to have a baby and they go through IVF and all of these other things that we have created as ways to help fertility, and then some they can't. I have family members who couldn't. They don't have children. That science would prioritize in any way of males having babies. I think that's very insulting to women.
I think it's a catchy headline. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do too. I don't think that there's I can't imagine that anyone's there going, you know what? No, I'm not going to try work on curing cancer. This is where my efforts are going to go. I can't fathom it. I don't think that any serious scientist is doing anything on it. Not for that reason, anyway.
Right, not for that reason. I think you have to always follow the money, right? You want to hope that everyone has like good intentions or they're doing things for the best reason. But when it comes to like any kind of activist group, for the most part, it seems to be really fueled and get its like life force from a negative source. Like it's like usually like anger, hate, or like vengeance of sorts. Like when you talk about people that detransition, like that's some scary stuff. Like Abigail Schreier, uses her platform to bring a lot of information on that, and she's constantly under attack. But I'm like, you can't ignore these women that just ruined their body. I'm not talking aesthetically, right? I'm talking like they cannot have children. Like some of them might not even be able to orgasm again, right? Like sex isn't the same. That's a very big deal. Their bone loss, all of these things. So we just try to, and we just say like, no, let's not listen to them, right? They don't have anything valuable to share.
They're completely ignored. You should actually, I can recommend, like I know of some absolutely amazing detransitioning women, and you should have one on your show because we really should be elevating their voices because they know so much. They have so much information about how kids are getting into this, what activists are actually saying behind closed doors. There's so many of them who talk about how it is older men preying on them. And
really?
Yes. And so the two different situations, there's just males, they're just men, straight up men, who will be there grooming them or be sort of part of it. I don't want to sort of take the words out of their mouth or anything, but then there's also older trans women who will be the dominant one in the relationship, so you have these young, questioning trans men, and these older trans women, and these detransitioning women are now saying, well, I realized that I was still being dominated by someone who's been socialized as a male. So you take away all of the gender studies thing, everything, all of this stuff that say they all peddle, and no, someone's either socialized male or female. Like Buck Angel talks about it all the time. Buck was raised female. That's what he says. Like that's why what makes him a great man. All men should be raised as women, and yeah, I mean that's why I think one of the reasons why he's so awesome, his perspective. He knows what it's like to walk down the street as a woman. He knows what it's like to walk down the street and be perceived as a man. He has such a unique perspective in that.
Absolutely. And then he was like the first one like to really do a full medical transition. Yeah. And, he was, living this life as a lesbian, as like a butch lesbian in a time where like that wasn't as acceptable as it is today. So it could have been like a lot more dangerous. Like, and then to attack someone like that, he was disinvited from a medical conference, actually, last I talked to him. And we're like, this is medical information that could save like a real trans person's life or change their mind, right? Like if they find out certain information, maybe that's too much for them and they'll just do other means of passing, if you will. But to silence anyone's voice that's truly experienced these things, to me, is a little bit alarming. And what's also curious is like you don't see boys aren't really being talked about right now. So why is it like everyone's like going after the young girls? I find that curious. I suppose is it just like their psyche maybe? Because with the stuff with Abigail's work, it was like up 3,000% for people for
4,000.
4,000, girls that were now identifying as boys.
Because it's the aberration of it, because the diagnostic history of gender dysphoria has always involved young boys. And who most grow out of it, as she says. But what is happening with girls is so clearly a social contagion. And I get it to a point. Like, what young girl doesn't have body image issues? Whether it's we have them inherently or it's because of this, especially now. I mean, I can't even fathom being a young girl now in this Instagram world. It must be terrifying. But when I was 15, 16, 17, I had an eating disorder. I had body dysmorphia. I'm a little like slight girl now. I mean, take 10 kilos away from me. And I like to, when I look at myself now, that I ever thought that I was fat is absurd to me. Well, in my mind, I mean, it wasn't in reality. And there's a lot of lots of similarities between body dysmorphia and gender dysphoria.
It's just like maybe like the fact that you're like uncomfortable now means that you must be in the wrong body or something like that.
Yeah, because like we're not saying to like no one is saying to an anorexic girl, like, let's give you liposuction. You'd be considered an evil madman. So why are we saying to like 16, 17-year-old girls, let's give you a mastectomy? It just... No, like, because I think like once you're an adult, and especially over the age of 25, like our brains don't stop developing until we're 25. So once you're over 25, it's your body. I mean, if you feel like if you feel your life would be better if you got rid of your penis, all power to you. That's how you want to live. It's not going to make you a woman, but if that makes your life more comfortable, I have no problem with it. Or if a woman wants to like remove her breasts, okay, that can help you. It's not going to make you a man. So I think it's the lying to people, and that's what a lot of detransitioners say, is that they were transitioning and then they realized, I'm never going to be a man. I'm never going to be considered a man. And that's one of the things, like when we're constantly told like this whole trans women are women and you have to treat them like women. First of all, I'm like, how does one treat women? I don't think you want to be treated like a woman. And I'm also like, if I walk into a meeting full of men, which I had to do, if I had walked in and said my pronouns are he and him, I'm a man, not a single one of them is going to treat me like a man. So I think that it's just this thing of like, let's just stop lying to people. If we actually just talk about all of this stuff in reality, we can really make some changes that are really good, of which is celebrating gender non-conforming people. That should be fantastic. We could also create safe spaces for trans women and trans men, which are needed.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm all for a third or fourth bathroom option. I think this is stuff, especially in the developed world where this is prevalent, we can do this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an issue. But we've just got to work together with it. That's always my thing with trans people. I always say when they are attacking me, I try to explain to them, the feminists are on your side. We want you to be who you want to be. We're totally fine with that. We want you to be safe. We just want it all based in reality and that you understand that you can't change your biological sex. That's what it comes down to because of how much it affects women.
100%. Are you worried at all about losing your app, getting removed from the App Store or losing your hosting or anything like that?
No. No, a few reasons. One is we are essentially as inclusive as one could possibly be. I mean, this is the other thing when we are attacked for being transphobic or trans exclusionary. Trans identifying females are welcome on Giggle. It's just males. If any, it's the other thing as well that people seem to forget. There's lots of apps for different demographics of people. I mean, we've all existed and gotten on with our lives pretty well, knowing that Grindr is out there. And there's it's not. I've never been like, oh, Grindr has to include me. No, we know exactly who it's for, and that's fine. There's apps based for dating, based solely on religion. There's Jewish dating apps, there's Muslim dating apps, Christian dating apps. So to do anything for and go after a female app, you would then have to you'd have to apply it to all of the other apps that are out there. And then in terms of our hosting and stuff like that, we were very smart about how we do that sort of stuff. That's all I'll say.
Oh, good. Yeah, because you don't really think about that until you saw what happened with Parler. And when that got taken, I think it might be back up. I haven't checked, but
on its way, I think. I haven't checked in the last few days. Yeah, we have. So I always say this to people, and especially there'll be tech men who come after me, and they talk to me and they treat me. It's like they think I coded Giggle, and I'm like, oh, no. I don't even talk to the coders most of the time. My dad works at Giggle. He's our intern. He's intern fairy because he understands tech language. I do not. If you put me in a room talking to the coders, we speak completely different languages to each other. Mm-hmm. They don't understand my colorfulness, and I don't understand their completely dry language. We're like almost two different species. And so my dad is the one who project manages them and works with them every day because he's the filter that I go through. Mm-hmm. And he knows how to filter the lunacy that I go on about. So I didn't code it. I didn't write the algorithm. I'm not a math scientist. I wanted to create an app for women and then found the amazing people who could help make that happen. And it's just so lucky that a friend of my dad's actually is a back end and algorithm builder man. I don't know.
He's the techie.
Yeah. And so he does all of that. And so he was, when we were working out and sort of, you've got to work out obviously what the app is going to be, but then you've got to work out how you're going to actually build it and map all of that out. And he made some absolutely brilliant decisions along the way of that. So for example, the problem with Parler, what their big issue is when Amazon Web Services dropped them, it's because you can, when you're doing your back end, you can use Amazon's code, all of that sort of stuff. So then if you've used all of that, that's going to change sort of the relationship or what the control they have over your platform. We don't have that.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's a lot of control, right? Because it's like, well, private companies can do what they want unless it goes against the narrative. Because I would assume a lot of the people that are yelling at you were probably cheering when Trump got booted off Twitter.
That's the thing. Yes, 100%. Yes. there was someone the other day that like a trans woman who did a post and tagging in Apple support saying, you know, this should be removed. It does, they do say it. Mm-hmm. And two things. One, I do step in and have a conversation and say like, no, there are apps for trans people. Mm-hmm. There's three biggest ones. There's Tammy, TS, and I think one's just called straight up trans. Mm-hmm. They named it anything other than what it is. Mm-hmm. So they would have to remove them. And no, I'm completely in support. I think it's fantastic. That is actually what is needed. I think trans people should be able to connect.
100%.
Different experiences and it's such a unique journey that I'm never going to be able to comprehend. And then also I've met through Twitter, like the Buck Angel and so many other amazing transgender people who come in and support and put some trolls in their place when they come after me, which I'm just forever grateful. There's one, she's asked to be called a transsexual woman, so I always do. Her name's Naya. I think she's in Scotland. One of the funniest people I've ever met. And whenever trolls are coming after me, I'm always just like, Naya, can you please jump in here? And she's like, cold. And she's like my little trans fairy who comes in and just like tells people like, no, this is how it is. But she gets so much hate. It's just and blocked by like someone will call me anti-trans, and then she'll come in and say, no, she's not. I'm 30 years into my transition. I know what I'm talking about. And then the person will block her. And I'm like,
do you think that they're actually, the people that are yelling at everyone, are they actually part of that community, or they're just jumping in and trying to claim it?
Well, as I said, so when you've got, like, say, if it's just like a little random Twitter troll, I don't really care. But like, say yesterday, it was a journalist that called me anti-trans. And so Naya jumped in and went, how dare you say that? Then that journalist blocked Naya. And I'm like, but you're blocking her. You're not listening to her. And she just has a different perspective. She just has a different opinion. She just hasn't adhered to some of the dogma that you are. She's still trans. If that's what we're
not
going
the right kind, though.
Yeah, but it's like if we're going for trans rights here, and trans rights are human rights, isn't part of the rights of trans rights to be able to think for yourself and be your own person and not adhere to ideology? I mean, that's a pretty basic right, because this is one of the things we were just going back to what we were saying earlier. With the trans rights thing, trans people have rights. They're very, very protected.
I don't know anyone that's like saying like, let's take those away. Like, no, I don't know, maybe I live in like a bubble, but I don't see that.
The only rights they don't have universally are to be included in women's spaces and women's sport. It's changed a little bit now with the executive order in the US in terms of sport, which like, I'm like, Biden, I'm on your side. And that's the first thing you do. It's devastating.
Yeah. It's like, of all the things you could have done when you first got in there, like that was pressing. And like, again, we're ignoring data. Like there's enough scientific evidence that the average couch potato man, his grip strength is more than that of a woman that is like in the Olympics, like an Olympic athletic woman.
Yeah,
couch
that's
potato man.
Yeah,
you don't stand a chance.
Nothing. There's like literally, but that's why we're physically scared of them. Because you can have a guy who's done nothing but watch Netflix for 5 years and he's still going to be stronger. Like I run every day. I run about 8 kilometers a day, which is in miles, not much. It's about 4 or 5 miles.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So I do it. It's like my 1 hour a day where like, I don't have to think about Giggle. I have to talk about Giggle. It's like my sanity hour. But I notice that when I'm running, so I've been fit for my life. There are like people like men in their 70s who will run past me, and I don't run slow. Like I can sort of do like 8 kilometers in like 45 minutes. It's not slow. No. And yeah, like I had one yesterday and I was like, oh, Grandpa. Yeah, I mean, men and women are different. Our strides are different. Everything about it. It's so unfair because when you like think of things especially in America with how the education system is set up and everything, how many women, especially in underprivileged situations, use athletic scholarships to change their lives.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going, no, there's going to be so many cases where no matter how hard they try, they can't beat the men. And there's this narrative at the moment, oh, this will just make women train harder. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you going to go and tell Serena to her face that she doesn't train hard enough?
Mm-hmm.
That's what's been the problem with women athletes. They're just not trying hard enough. No.
Yeah, she's like a beast of a woman too. Like if there was ever like the epitome of like the athletic, like superpower woman, right? That it would be her. It would be her.
Serena,
and I think
she cannot beat the men.
Yeah, I was gonna say they've done that, right? Like they've done like studies, or they actually tried it. But
yes, Serena and Venus played a doubles match years ago against, I can't remember who it was against, but they lost like 6-1, 6-1.
Yeah,
6-1. They've lost. Yeah,
it doesn't get more powerful than those women. So if they can't do it, we're all doomed.
Exactly. Like even the Australian Open was just on. And one of the things I was focusing on when I was watching it is like the speed of the men's serves versus the women's serves. There's like, a man will do a serve and it's like 220 kilometers an hour. And a woman, like Serena was doing ones and it was like 179. Well, that's completely different when you're returning that. And then you've got the strength behind it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, if someone was like, oh God, if Serena was serving at me, I mean, I'd duck. It'd be petrifying. But it's just nonsense to think that there aren't these differences. And I think the differences should be celebrated, because we're not saying one is better or worse. It's not like men are stronger, therefore they're better, or women are weaker athletically or physically, so we're worse. No, we're just different.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the cool, interesting thing. We're just different. We're better at other things, like being a human.
Yeah, I don't I don't like the push that like the whole equal outcome, like that's essentially what the argument is, right? Like it's like equal outcome. They don't want equal opportunity, because I mean there's other, like you could either have the biological women that agree to play the sport knowing that this person is trans, right? And that's their right. If they want to try to compete, go for it. But I do feel like that needs to be disclosed, especially if it's in like a physical contact sport. I'm kind of
absolutist about it. I think that like rules are rules. We live in a society where you have to have rules, and you can't be making decisions all of the time, or you can't be thinking, oh, hang on, which rule? How does this apply here? What's the technicality of it? I think that no one is saying trans people can't play sport.
Right.
You just have to play it in the sex class of which you were born. That's it. Of which you exist in. So, there's a case in Australia with a trans woman AFL player who's like 6'3", I think, and like 200 something pounds. One woman's leg has been broken. So far. Which injuries happen in sport, no matter what. And in female on female sport, injuries can happen. So it's not like I'm saying this is only unique to that situation. Obviously not. But when you see pictures, this male just towers over everybody else. It's just quite crazy, but you're a bigot if you bring that up. And then I'm like, who's the woman that missed out on a spot on the team?
Mm-hmm.
And so also when I see like podiums, there's lots of pictures you'll see like that are starting to go around, because it is happening more and more, and you'll have the trans woman in the first position and then there's second and third. And I feel sorry for those women, but I also feel really sorry for the woman who came fourth.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's wrong. Really, really wrong. And especially like for someone like Biden, for that to be basically the first thing, like the first day.
Well, he did kind of say that's what he was going to do, like everything.
Yeah, I hoped that it was a campaign slogan. He also said he was going to give people thousands of dollars to live on, and that hasn't happened. So, I mean, they do say stuff, and it doesn't come into fruition. So the fact that one did, I think, was really, really disappointing. And I've talked to people here in Australia about it, because say some of our sporting institutions have been captured by it. And the ones who work there who don't adhere to it, and they say it's very clear, a woman is going to have to be injured or die before people will take notice. And
perhaps, but I would say the thing that sparked a lot of the conversation when it came to sports was Joe Rogan was talking about Fallon Fox. And I mean, Fallon was wrecking people, like absolutely wrecking women, like to an uncomfortable level. And they're still not, like, he's really like the loudest person about that. I haven't seen like a lot of people that are like, you know what, maybe we shouldn't do this. This isn't really okay.
So I think that the reason why people don't stop with that one is they're like, oh, well, it's violent anyway.
But it's
which is absurd.
Different. Yeah, it's very different.
I've watched it. I've seen it. How you could be anyway an empathetic person and watch that and go, oh, this is good. And you're just a moron. But I do wonder if it will take something like, I don't know, handball or swimming, all these different, men are faster at swimming.
They're faster at everything.
Everything.
It's like it's a muscle fiber situation. But I think, like you said earlier, we tend to overcorrect. And I think, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of nonsense before we, again, overcorrect. And the people that are going to probably suffer those consequences are the people that we're allegedly, supposedly trying to protect, right? It's just it's the nature of the beast.
I do think this is an overcorrection. But I've also made the point that, do you know what one group never gets an overcorrection on? Women. We tried. The overcorrection should have, they stopped it before it could be an overcorrection with Me Too. Because there was parts of Me Too that I was critical of. Like, I'm
critical about a lot of it.
Yeah, like I wrote an article like in defense of Aziz Ansari, for example. I don't think that was a Me Too situation at all. I dated in LA for 8 years. I know what a cesspool that place is. And I know what a bad date, like a very bad date in LA is like. That was not one of them, to be completely fine. But yeah, this whole thing, I think, really stems from that. I don't think it's a coincidence that this has happened to women after that. And I don't think that there'll ever be like an overcorrection for women after this. It'll be like, okay, fine, you can have your word back. Happy now. And we'll have to just get on with it. But I mean, the Me Too thing, I'm okay with it being, I have these conversations, especially with guys all the time. There's 7 different men in Hollywood that I could easily Me Too. I never have. Partly because I don't want to be associated with them. I don't want my name associated with their name, that it's ever brought up together. Some of these men are names that people know. Some are not. There's lots of them and you don't say anything.
Yeah, the problem is it turned from something that was real and had enough evidence behind it and like needed to be fixed, and then somehow that switched to believe all women with no evidence, with no like you have the character of someone, right? Like the longevity of like who they've been in society for 30, 40 years. Like that totally gets discounted. So you could have a stand-up guy who's married with kids, who's never, done a single thing against someone else violently or sexually. And then one person is like, I'm just going to send a tweet. And then that man's life gets imploded. There's no like trial. I'm like very much against that. Like it's supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And I do agree with you. I think that it's more complicated than that though, because first of all, no one believes all women. So it's never happened. And so you often need more than one woman saying the same thing about a man for it to be believed. One of the guys that, to me, I mean, he's a Hollywood guy, married, he's got kids. I'm talking like we were having a drinks meeting, hands up skirt, just absolutely disgusting behavior. If I was to tweet it out, that would be the reaction. He's married, he's got kids. What are you talking about? No one's ever made any allegations against him before. I'd be like, cool, well, he did do this. That's the thing. I don't want that. I don't want to do it. I do like it. So, it's like, say, like, you take Bill Cosby. It took like over 50 women. Harvey Weinstein. My friend was his longest serving female assistant. And so she didn't know he was raping. But she knew how horrible he was. Everyone knew how horrible he was. That was like Hollywood's worst secret. Like, he was notorious for being so horrible. He would like throw staples at his assistants, like office equipment, and scream at them, and mind control, and horrible man.
Right. But then the overcorrection, though, is like when you look at young boys that are on college campuses, and then you have like the Title IX situation where a girl can just say, like, maybe it's drunk sex, and then she regrets it, and she's like, I was assaulted. That boy doesn't get a lawyer. He doesn't get to know who accused him, and he gets booted from school. Like, that's where it's where we started, where we are now.
Yeah, I completely agree with stuff like that, because we have to. And as women, it's really important that we understand the difference between us making a mistake. We've all drunkenly hooked up with someone and woken up the next morning and gone, oh, shit. Wouldn't have done that if I was sober. So we've all made mistakes. That's totally fine in that way. You can't then go and abuse something and call every unwanted thing in like that sexual assault. I completely agree with you there, because I do agree that understand that there are some men who are terrified to even approach a woman in a positive, flirtatious way because it could be misconstrued. And it's like, no, this is human interaction. We want to be able to be approached by a nice man who thinks we're nice and is going to treat us well. We need more of that. We don't scare them away.
Right. 100%.
Yeah. So I know, I agree with you there. That is wrong. But I mean, this should just be, I think, it shouldn't be that hard or this controversial when talking about like rape or sexual assault. I think that if it was handled better across the board, it would be different, but because it's so handled so badly. We have a situation in Australia right now where this girl who worked at Parliament House, like at the government, her and a colleague, they were at a work event. They had drinks. They were going home together. They were both drunk. Well, she was, I'm not sure if he was, but she was drunk. He said, I was going to stop in the office. They did. And she passed out on the couch, I think is the story, and then woke up and he was having sex with her. And now it's this huge, big political scandal because which politicians knew about it, who didn't. And so it's this poor girl is going through everyone's worst nightmare right now. And there's a lot of, well, she was drunk. And there's a difference between drunkenly hooking up with a guy and drunkenly passing out on his couch and you wake up and he's having sex with you.
Yeah, very different animals.
Yeah, so that's the thing where we're just going to be clear about stuff like that. And I mean, it's all ridiculous, Candace, all of it.
It all is, but it led you to, creating like this really needed platform. And probably if you didn't go through all of the stuff in Hollywood when you were a screenwriter there, then maybe you wouldn't have been inspired to do all this.
100%. I wrote screenplays about strong, independent women and always had a very sort of feminist, female-centric message. They were usually like romantic comedies where by the end the girl realized the relationship was with herself. None of them ever got made because I swear I'd sell them, but male executives and directors would turn to the last 10 pages and go, there's no men on this. Turn it into paper airplanes. But yeah, no, it's like I've had horrible experiences in Hollywood and it took a lot to recover from, but they've all led me to here. And when I had realized I had to give up screenwriting and I'll never ever write for money ever again, I became at peace with it when we created Giggle, because it was actually doing something for women in a much more constructive way than writing. So I'm very grateful in that respect. It wouldn't change it. And yeah, and now we have this like nice growing Giggle community and women all over the world. Like that's my favorite part is like when there'll be women on there and it's like, I'm in Pakistan or I'm in Spain and like, hi, I'm like, I'm in Australia. I can't believe you know about Giggle. It's so cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's got to be awesome. And again, like with all the negativity you're getting from activists, I mean, I've seen you on a lot of really big podcasts. So again, like silver lining there, right? So they're giving you a bunch of advertising essentially.
Yeah, it's like a double-edged sword because whenever like you get like all of the good stuff, like all of the like downloads and girls discovering Giggle and starting to use it, and that's obviously awesome. It's the goal, and then you have the attacks happening at the same time. That's okay. I'm used to it now.
Just makes you more resilient.
Well, they've sent me a photo of the Grover Muppet in a noose. I honestly, that to me was I was like, that's the bottom of a Muppet. And it was like the cutest little Grover as well. And I had such a problem with it. It really did bother me because I was born 10 weeks premature. And in my incubator, I had a Grover toy. So Grover's like always been my protector because it's my last name. And so, yeah, that sort of stuff, like it's horrible, but it's why you have a female platform so we can escape it and have a refuge away from it. And it's basically it. They prove the point. They prove the need for it.
100%. Yeah. So do you want to tell the listeners where they can follow you, how they can support you, and where they can find your app?
Okay, so Giggle is on both the App Store and Google Play. Just search Giggle. And then and check out Giggle Talk because that is the thing I'm most excited about. And it's where you get to, it's the public feed where you get to see women's opinions and conversations from all around the world. And then I'm on Twitter at Sall Tweets. It's 2 L's, SALL. I spell my own name wrong. And yeah, that's basically where I am.
Well, thank you so much. I had a great time and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
That's it for this week's episode. If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate and review and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You can also share this podcast with a friend. It helps my podcast grow and I really appreciate it. I hope to see you next week.